I'll never forget that Sunday. As the car rolled down the narrow road to the village, the familiar landscape promised just another ordinary day. The same smell of pine, the same creak of the wooden bridge, the same ritual my husband had followed for years. Igor always went alone to visit his parents. I stayed home, happy to do my part by making jars of pickles, soups, and pies he handed over with pride. But that morning, I decided to turn up unannounced. A simple gesture to show that his world was mine, too. A few yards from the house, I parked and took a deep breath. I was holding the basket carefully when I happened to look past the fence. That's when I froze. To understand why that instant rattled me, we need to back up a bit. I, Natalie, live surrounded by books, tight schedules, and the constant smell of fresh-baked bread. I teach literature at the university. I find answers to life's big questions in Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, where every comma matters. Igor runs on a different logic. He's an engineer, crazy about diagrams, numbers, and circuits. Where I see metaphors, he sees mechanics. Where he spots a problem, I look for meaning. That apparent opposition never drove us apart. It just sharpened our roles. He puts up shelves and fixes leaks. I uncover new stories and spices. Together we keep our balance. On Sundays, Igor rose at dawn, drove to his parents' wooden house, and spent the day fixing whatever needed fixing. The fence the rain had knocked down, the roof that kept leaking, the flower bed that needed new seedlings. At night he came back tired, shirt smeared with dirt, but wearing a calm smile. He told me village gossip, accidents on the road, newborn animals at the farm next door. I listened while pouring tea, sure that this quiet cycle was his way of repaying the care he'd received as a child. Precisely because I respected that bond, I decided to step into the equation, deliver the food in person, hug my in-laws, and watch Igor in action, shovel in hand, pride in his eyes. I didn't tell anyone. I wanted the surprise effect. I wanted to share Sunday. When I pushed the gate, the creak sounded louder than usual, as if announcing my presence to the whole world. The house was there, simple, ringed with lovingly pruned rose bushes. I heard muffled voices. I walked closer, slowly. Then I saw Igor, not in the garden but on the porch, kneeling, head bowed. Beside him lay an open toolbox, and on the table, something I didn't recognize at first. I stopped, hidden behind an old oak, trying to fit that scene into our perfectly choreographed Sundays. I've always loved the rituals that turn our house into a haven. The coffee Igor makes me at dawn, his questions about my day, the whispered poetry when the nightlight is already off. Even so, lately I'd noticed something different in his eyes, a restless glimmer, like he was waiting for news that never came. I tried to blame work fatigue, that project that seemed to drain all his energy. I multiplied gestures of care, but the silence inside Igor's eyes stayed right there, untouched. Early today I woke up with a clear decision: surprise his parents with an unannounced visit. Maybe the country air would help me figure out what's going on, and who knows, the surprise might cheer Igor up when he found out. I opened the fridge and found the pickles I'd made last week. On the table, I gathered mini apple pies, homemade sausage, and a jar of peel-off we haven't even opened yet. I could already picture my in-laws smiling as they tasted each thing, and my heart warmed. I put on my comfiest jeans, a jacket, and a scarf. It's sunny out, but the cold is biting. I grabbed the keys in the bag, walked to the old Niva in the garage, and packed everything in the trunk, careful not to break anything. I shut the lid and took a deep breath. The engine was waiting, and so was the road. And even though I didn't know it yet, every mile ahead might forever change the silence that had built up between Igor and me. I turned the key and felt the Niva vibrate under my hands. Unhurried, I left the city behind and steered onto the road that winds between open fields and patches of forest. With every mile, the country air seemed to sweep away the week's rush. For the first few minutes, I sang along with the radio, remembering the laughs that used to echo around the Sunday tables at Igor's parents' place. Then I switched to an orchestral track and let the violins blend with the green gold of the autumn trees lining the asphalt. 2 hours later, I had mentally revisited nearly every family joke, planned compliments for lunch, and pictured the flash of surprise on their faces when they saw me. My heart raced as I turned onto the dirt lane that leads to the village. The cottage appeared just as I remembered: weathered wood, carved windows, the garden still dotted with flowers brave enough for the first cold spell. I parked by the gate, smile ready, hand on the latch. I climbed the steps with the lightness of someone coming home, but I stopped before knocking. On the porch, I saw Igor talking with a woman I'd never seen before. In her arms, something small, wrapped in a light blanket. In that instant, I felt the ground shift. The day that promised reunions turned upside down, and I had to decide whether to step forward or head back to the car before everything collapsed for good. I parked a few yards from the playground and, from inside the car, searched for Igor with my eyes. There he was, kneeling before a little girl who couldn't have been more than 5. With every word, the girl smiled, and Igor's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in ages. My hand settled on the doorknob, but I couldn't turn it. I froze as though the scene pinned me in place. The little girl broke free from the woman beside her and ran to Igor, who hugged her and gently brushed her hair. The affection was obvious, undeniable. It was love. I stepped back. The floor seemed to give way. This wasn't a chance meeting. In one hard flash, I realized Igor had another life. Wife, child, everything hidden from me. I got back to the car almost without feeling my legs. I slammed the door, turned the key, and took off. As the engine roared, the world around me went silent. I drove aimlessly, tears smearing the windshield. One question hammered at me. How could he? Memories flooded in. Our first kiss, the wedding, the promises of kids. Every scene now felt fake, like I'd memorized lines on a stage. When had the second story started? How many clues had I made invisible? The road stretched out ahead, but I saw no destination, only a void where certainty used to be. All that was left was the next breath and the doubt that wouldn't let me go anytime soon. I felt the blow first as a hole in my chest, and then as a flame climbing my face. Part of me wanted to spin the car around, confront Igor, and drag every answer out of him right there. But the fear of hearing what I already suspected paralyzed me. As I pushed down the highway, memories lined up. The visits to his parents, the ever-later returns, the heavy silences I pretended not to notice. Suddenly, everything made sense, and it hurt. On impulse, I pulled onto the shoulder. I cried until my body went limp. When the tears dried, only one question remained. What now? Walking away without understanding would hurt as much as digging up the truth. I took a deep breath, started the engine, and drove back to the city. I decided there would be no yelling or accusations. I needed to listen before judging. Dawn found me rehearsing useless dialogues. That's when an unlikely plan took shape. I'd go back to the village not as a betrayed wife, but as a researcher interested in old houses. Any excuse that would get me through the right door. I spent 2 days repeating that story until I almost believed it. When I arrived, my heart pounded like a drum. I parked in plain sight, walked through the gate, and faced Elena, the woman I'd seen with Igor. I held her gaze, felt my voice nearly fail, and still said, "Hi, I heard your house has stories worth knowing." In that suspended second, anything could happen. I didn't know whether I'd find relief, anger, or something with no name yet, but it was there, in front of her, that the real conversation would start. And I didn't plan on looking away. When I rang the doorbell, I had no idea whether Igor had been lying to me for weeks or years. I just knew I needed the truth. The door creaked open, and a woman with a calm face and tired shoulders sized me up for a second. "Come in," she said, pushing the rusty gate. "I'm Elena." I swallowed hard before lying. Irina. The hallway smelled of bread in the oven and powdered milk. On a worn rug, a little girl played with a doll. "This is Sasha," she said. The girl gave me a curious look but didn't come closer. I waved quickly, trying not to stare at the face that linked guiltlessly 2 lives. In the kitchen, Elena heated water and set out 2 mugs. Silence stretched along with the steam from the tea. I watched her hands, controlled gestures, unrushed. Nothing in those hands reminded me of the rival I feared. I only saw a mother. "Have you lived here long?" I ventured. "A few years," she answered. Then I dropped the name that weighed. "Does Igor come often?" She stopped halfway through pouring. "Every Sunday. He fixes whatever's broken, helps Sasha with her math." My stomach flipped. I set the cup down before it shook. "I saw him with you a few days ago," I confessed. "I'm his wife." The wall clock ticked louder. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Elena closed the kettle and took a deep breath. "I see. He didn't tell you." "Never. Why hide it?" "Ask him," she said firmly, not looking away. "Maybe he was afraid of losing you." I swallowed the reply, burning in my throat. "And you? Do you still love him?" She let out a tired half-smile. "I did love him, yeah. Now we only share Sasha's care." And her eyes landed on the little girl now spinning the toy truck in circles. "That's enough." We stayed there, two women sharing a silence too heavy for words. The tea cooled, the clock kept ticking off seconds I'd never get back. I realized the next question wasn't for Elena anymore. It was for Igor, the moment I walked back out that door. Igor always shows up as a dad, sometimes as a friend, but as a man, he's not by my side anymore. When Elena said that, I wanted to argue, but her voice carried a certainty that disarmed me. "He loves Sasha more than his own life," she went on, watching the girl. "He lives for her, plays, teaches, and Sasha worships him." I watched the scene on the rug. My son was pushing a toy car, humming softly. At one point, he looked up at me. There was no fear or rejection there, just curiosity. I smiled. He smiled back, shy, and went back to playing. "And what about Igor?" My voice came out smaller than the thought. "Is he happy?" Elena let out a long, deep sigh. "I don't know. He's split in two. He wants to be honest, but he's terrified of hurting you, and he's scared to death of losing his kid." Her answer cut right through me. "And me?" My hands tightened. "Doesn't he feel how much this hurts?" "He does. He thought hiding it would be less cruel." "Naive," I whispered. "Maybe. But it wasn't malice. He tried to protect everyone." Silence. The weight of the word protection bothered me. Lying for years. Protection or cowardice? I stared at Elena. "Why are you telling me all this?" "Because I see your pain," she said, not looking away. "And because Igor isn't a villain. He's just lost, that's all." "Aren't you afraid I'll take him from you?" She shook her head. "If he goes, let it be by choice. What matters is Sasha. Her happiness comes before any fight." A void spread between us. Inside me, anger and compassion collided. Hurt and a strange urge to forgive kept trading places. Can you call something built on a lie happiness? I still don't know. The question is blank, and the rest of the story, it seems, is up to me. I thanked Elena for the tea and, more than anything, for her honesty. "Whenever you need me, I'll be here," she said. I stepped outside with the sun on my face but a chill inside. In the car, I could only repeat the same question. What do I do now? When I opened the door, Igor stood up from the couch. "Where were you?" I set my bag on the table to catch my breath. "I went to talk to Elena." I saw fear flash in his eyes. Then he spilled everything. The brief affair with her, Sasha's birth, the fear of losing me, the choice to stay silent. He talked about guilt, duty, love. He finished staring at the floor. "I lied because I didn't want to hurt you. I never stopped loving you." I listened in silence. There was regret, but also something steady, like someone who's already decided for himself. That night, we shared the bed like two strangers. The room felt bigger than before. I didn't sleep. I ran through every memory of our beginning, every plan we'd made. It all felt like a draft, scribbled over with crossouts. When morning broke, he left for work. I wandered around the apartment, touching things as if testing whether the world was still solid. Not even the books welcomed me. Their covers seemed to know too much. There, between the door creaking and the silence, I realized the next decision is mine alone. I pressed my forehead to the glass and let my eyes wander down the street. Outside, everything went on. Hurried footsteps, kids' laughter, a kiskadee calling. In here, though, my world had collapsed. Elena's words kept echoing. Igor is a good dad? He takes care of Sasha? There's only responsibility between us. The calm way she said it felt true, but trusting that story or not is a dilemma only time can solve. The next morning, I sat across from Igor and got straight to the point. I needed to leave, breathe away from him, figure out what was still between us. He just nodded. The space was mine by right. I packed light and drove to the family's old dacha, ringed by pine trees and silence. I spent days hiking the trails, flipping through dusty novels, rewinding my own movie, our first date, the open-air wedding, the quiet nights of the early years. It all felt so solid in my memory, yet distant, almost like it belonged to other people. Had it all been an act? Had Igor been living a second life this whole time? I'd always seen him as a straight arrow guy. Casting him as a cheater felt wrong. Even so, the facts were screaming. Then I remembered the rest of what Elena had said. Igor didn't want to hurt me. He was scared of losing me. He made choices with Sasha in mind. Suddenly, the story took on a new shape. Maybe it wasn't a thrill-seeking affair, but a crooked kind of protection. While the wooden roof creaked on cold nights, I realized the final decision was still a long way off. I understood only one thing. Before I demanded answers, I had to understand. And when the ground seems to give way, understanding is the first step toward walking again. The night I uncovered the secret, the ground vanished beneath my feet. It wasn't just that there was another family. It was that Igor, the man I'd poured my days into, had hidden it all for years. I spent the first few days in a whirl of anger and silence. I could just leave, shut the door and start over. I could also pretend nothing had changed, swallow my pride, and keep living in a fake peace. But there was a third road, hard, uncertain, maybe freeing, to understand why Igor had carried such a heavy load and still stayed by my side. The morning I made my choice, the sun had barely touched the window. I packed my bag without hesitating and drove back to the city. I found Igor on the couch, hands clasped, head down. "I know everything," I said, keeping my voice steady. He looked up, and in his eyes I saw fear mixed with relief. "I've decided to stay," I went on, "but on one condition: we start from scratch. Trust isn't bought, it's earned." Igor needed a second before he replied. "I accept. Whatever you need, I'll do it." I took a deep breath. "We start today. I want to go to the village, meet Elena and Sasha." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. In that nod, I realized the next step wasn't just about him anymore, it was about all of us. And it's on that road, 2 suitcases in the trunk and 3 hearts trying to beat in sync, that our real story starts again. I inhaled before turning the key. Igor, sitting beside me, just murmured, "Then let's go." The dirt road showed up after the last sign. In the trunk I had a bag of fresh pastries, my way of telling Elena and Sasha there was no room for resentment. Even so, my hands were sweaty on the wheel. When the house appeared around the bend, my heart raced. I'd barely cut the engine when Elena was already at the door, beaming like she'd been waiting for me a long time. "I knew you'd come," she said. Sasha, half hidden behind her mom, shot me a curious look. Elena introduced her. "This is Sasha." The girl managed a shy, "Hi." I knelt so we were eye to eye. "I brought something for you," I said, pulling the cloth-wrapped bag from the trunk. I handed it to Elena, who thanked me with a nod. "Come in. I'll put on water for tea." In the simple kitchen, we sat at the table. The steam from the tea mixed with the smell of the pastries. We talked about the weather, the kids, the life that kept moving while each of us held on to our doubts. I was still tense, but with every sip, my shoulders eased. When I saw Sasha bite into a pastry and flash a greasy smile, I realized that moment alone proved I'd chosen the right path. The teapot ran dry, and the silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was light.